All right, brand new edition of the Winning Plays podcast is here. My name is Brian Robb, joined by frequent guest co-host of the Winning Plays pod, Brendan Jackson of Celtics Hub. Making sure you're following him at Jack SOBD on Twitter for scorching hot Celtics takes, BC takes, and plenty of other goodness there. So, Jax, it's good to see you. We haven't talked since the trade deadline here, but we're going to start the pod here with Jaylen Brown's injury. I think it's the easiest place to go. It looks like the Celtics may have dodged a bullet. Just a sprained ankle. He seems to be day-to-day right now, out for the Memphis game on Thursday night. But what your initial impressions from the injury? And I saw, let's leave it here. We saw what Ime Udoka did on Tuesday night, going with Aaron Nesmith to start the second half against that Hawks game. Do you like that move going forward, or are you inclined to say, hey, let's roll Derrick White out with the starters to kind of see what it looks like?
So thanks for that intro. That was awesome. I love being on camera, by the way. This is my first time on camera.
I mean, the flow looks good.
I know.
Make sure you're watching the video afterwards. Jackson's good.
My barber charges me double. Anyway, so yeah, let's kick it off with the injury, like you said. I know you texted me right when it happened because you had a bad angle. You were at the game. I'm watching it on my couch, and they showed the replay on TNT, and it looked nasty when I first saw it. Like, it looked like, one of those full rotations, not like a Gordon Hayward, like, oh God, his career's over type deal. But no, it was just one of those ankle rolls where you're just like, sometimes you do a little tweak and sometimes you do the full roll. It was the full roll. And so that was like, ugh. Now that being said, he jumped right back up. I saw you tweeted, we were on commercial break. I saw you tweeted immediately, like, he's walking under his own power. So that was a good sign. I know we've played ball our whole lives. You know that feeling when you roll an ankle and it initially feels bad, it looks bad, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, no, okay. Like, it hurts, but I'm going to be okay. That's my prediction with this injury. I think he's day-to-day. I think he's going to give it a go when he can. And Udoka's like, yeah, maybe he could play on Thursday, but why?
Right.
I just think there's no reason for him to play. So let's, give him another day-to-day. You got a big game on Sunday against Brooklyn. Just give it one day, right? And between you and me, we'll get to it. But, Memphis is going to be tough, even with Jaylen Brown, even with a healthy Jaylen Brown. So we'll get to that. And, if you're going to, roll the dice and just say, let's see what happens on a Thursday night game against one of the best teams in the league, you might as well just roll the dice, like I said. So in terms of starting, I hated putting Aaron Nesmith. I felt so bad for the kid. I feel like they threw him to the wolves. He hadn't played or played any meaningful minutes in the last 6, 10, 20. He was out of the rotation. You know what I mean? And so I get it. In moments, professional basketball players, you got to step up. I'll never forget talking to Marquise Daniels one time being he came off the bench and had a great game, similar. And we might have talked about this the last time I was on the pod, but Gerald, you remember a few years ago when Gerald Green came off started, Brad put him in the starting lineup.
Threw him in during the playoffs, sure.
And he was awesome. I get it. Professionals are supposed to be ready. And when I was talking to Marquise Daniels, I asked him, he had a really good game. He hadn't been in the rotation. And he was like, dude, I'm a professional. This is what we do. And it was just oh, okay. I should probably take that to my real life because I would just never be prepared that way, And so anyway, I just think they threw this kid to the wolves, and he just did what he does. He has that sort of unfocused energy where he looks like he's working very hard. And to be fair, he probably is, but it doesn't really translate into winning basketball. He doesn't make his threes. He's sort of getting beat off the dribble or getting bullied by Gallinari. It's so funny to see a guy like Marcus Smart body Gallinari, who's shorter than Aaron Nesmith. And then Aaron Nesmith just immediately get called for a foul, And I get it. It's hard to compare to Marcus Smart. But anyway, this is all to say I would definitely go with Derrick White. It's just, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's funny how, and Brad Stevens kind of did this too, where, they like to keep the rhythm of the rotation going. So it's okay, let's, like you said, let's throw the guy who's not playing into that slot in the starting five. And that way maybe we can hide him a little, but at least we have everything else kind of is, normal as is there. For a short-term absence like this, like what Brown's looking like I don't mind that too much. But to your point, like if it's, if you're, Nesmith is working his butt off, and obviously defensively they played, I don't know how much responsibility you want to give him to the turnaround, like not huge, but he played well enough where they, he wasn't a huge liability defensively out there. He was rebounding, he was working his butt off, he was benefiting from some missed shots by Atlanta. But like you said, it's a different can of worms these next 2 games with Memphis and Brooklyn coming up, and White is like a starter, and he's proven. So you I don't know whether you want to. It puts more pressure on Nesmith to put him in a spot like that, but I guess if he's gonna have to play either way. I guess if they want the continuity, that they might just stick with that.
Yeah, and I'm honestly okay with it, especially given like the time to prepare, for, at least mentally. Any of these NBA players are good basketball players. Like, let's dispel that notion that like the kid can't play. He can play. I don't know if he can play in the NBA and become like, he's still so young and become a real contributor in the NBA. But we know he can make shots. We know he like knows how to play the game. I just think because he's so young and because he's sort of was in, he was Danny's first round pick, right? And then he was in Brad's rotation. Everyone's really excited about him. And then Udoka came and was like, I don't know if I trust you. I'm going to like sort of play you in the beginning of the year, sort of not play you for 20 games. And now you're starting. Like, I just want to make sure that they don't ruin this kid before he gets a chance to actually like, fulfill his potential. And the other thing, which they're not thinking about, trust me, I know they're not thinking about, but I know we're thinking about, if he's in the starting lineup, everyone's going to be looking at him versus Desmond Bane.
That's a good point.
Aaron Nesmith, the guy that Danny picked over Desmond Bane. Essentially, that's what it is. He wanted him and Carson Edwards or something. Like, I forget what the mechanism was.
It's good that they dumped Ennis Freedom before this matchup, because that would serve as another reminder for the entire match. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to spend 10 minutes on Desmond Bane Raider in this podcast for entertainment's sake. But you're right. No, it is like the unintentional comparison there that will inevitably happen if those two guys on the floor. And you're right, they're not going. That's going to factor 0.0% into consideration. But the after the fact, like what he hears about after the game, on social media or whatever else, like that's obviously going to come up. But like so, well, let's transition to White though for a little bit, because White kind of came in. We've seen I think like 8 games from him now, so we're moving past the small sample size theater, if you will. I'd say the game against the Hawks was probably his best game, period. I know outside of maybe his debut when he played the Nuggets, they had another nice comeback win there, but he was, just like a monster in the second half there, kind of getting aggressive offensively, finding his shot there. And the 3-point shot still isn't falling, Jax, but it's still like, it almost is like he does enough other stuff where it seems like it doesn't matter on the right night, where you got other guys that are hitting shots too.
Well, it's kind of like you want Aaron Nesmith to be like that guy, right? To be like Derrick White, where it's like, even if your shots, I mean, obviously you want both their shots to fall, but if their shots are not falling, like Derrick obviously does a ton more handling the ball, initiating offense, playing that point role, and just his defense is really good. It's way better than I thought it was going to be. He attacks, he finishes, he has these like array of floaters. He's just, honestly, when they traded for him, I made some stupid, snarky tweet because I'm a jerk about how like the Celtics gave up so much for like the worst of the Spurs rotation wings. And now, obviously I'm not like watching the Spurs every day, but now I'm not so sure that that's true. I mean, that I think what I was trying to do was speak more to their wing depth. They got some great wing depth over in San Antonio. But I've loved what he's brought. I've loved that he can start. He can come off the bench. He can play point. He sort of looks like got that unorthodox herky-jerky game, but it goes in. He's super active, and he's super active on defense. He's super active rebounding the ball. I've just been a big fan. And he was 2 for 12 or something like the other night, like something like crazy where I'm like, oh man. But to be honest with you, that was like a revelation I saw after the game when I looked at the box score. Because to your point, like when you watch him play, you don't like you're not you might see that like his shot's not falling, but you don't feel like he's not affecting the game in a positive way. Right. Contrast that with Aaron Nesmith. You're seeing the effort for sure, but are you really seeing him and on the glass. He can absolutely he gobbles up defensive rebounds. I love it. I love his athleticism. But in the aggregate, are you really seeing a guy who's affecting the game in a positive way at this point? And obviously not as much as Derrick White, I would say.
I think and that's a really good point for the standpoint. The Celtics just don't have many guys didn't have a guy like that, period, that can kind of slide into that and Smart's, to his credit, like in the last 6 or 7 weeks has become that guy more and more offensively where the shot selection is better. The shots are going in more, obviously.
Right.
And the defense, we don't need to talk about that. Like it's kind of an offense focused discussion, but White is something where it's like the ball is just not going to stick with him. And he's shooting 24% from three, but like you're not going to quibble with any of the shots he's taking because they're either in rhythm or they're wide open. So
or end of the shot clock.
Or they're end of
exactly.
So when you get that and you have someone who's makes the ball move, who like probes the defense and helps and can be on the ball, off the ball, etc. Like kind of can slide in wherever. And to your point, like he probably has some of the worst numbers of the Spurs prospects, but if you're just strictly talking like who's like the worst player among them, like I don't think it was Derrick White. It's like, yeah, the guys, they're going to be better numbers in that group, but like from a pure like two-way standpoint, I think any team in the league could use a Derrick White, and whether he'll be worth the 15th overall pick and a potential picks, high pick swap in 2028, we'll see. But it's at least made this team a little bit more exciting. I think it just at least a little bit more relevant in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I have no problem with the trade now. I was a little bitter, like I said, like, airing my, unwarranted grievances when it first went down, but I love him. He's also a guy you want to watch, a guy you want to root for. Because to what you said earlier, like the ball doesn't stick with him. And that's been a huge problem with this team in the whole middle of the season, the ball stickiness. It's like every time, even there's small spots in games where you'll watch a game and obviously Tatum is probably the worst defender. It's sort of that double-edged sword of like he's so good one-on-one. So you're like, oh great, he's your star player. I grew up watching Paul Pierce go one-on-one and make shots and like get all revved up because of that. Like Tatum is just taking the mantle. He's just doing that kind of stuff that all stars do. Except that's not what this team in the modern NBA is built on, like success-wise. Like if they just move the ball, they're going to get open shots. The defense is just in the NBA has to like the NBA asks way too much of its defense because the stars are so good. So there was a scene they had a baseline camera in the Hawks game, and there were like 3 guys on Tatum, and there were like 4, like there was like 2 Celtics on the other side wide open, and he still found like I think another wide open guy. It was just like, it was awesome. It was awesome.
Right.
Now, Tatum in the beginning of the year, maybe he would try to do that dribble step back 3. And it's just like, no, move the ball.
And I don't know if you saw this earlier today, Jackson. Our buddy Mike Pina wrote for SI. He was kind of tracking Tatum mid-range attempts.
I did see that.
And I think it's down to 12% of his shots and it was in the 20s earlier in the season. And so that, when you combine that with the vision you're talking about, like it's kind of, it's sneaky. The biggest storyline of this turnaround right now is Tatum. I mean, you look at his assist numbers for the last 6 games. It's like 6, 5, 4, 6, 3, 7. It's becoming more the rule rather than the exception. It's like, okay, he's fine with those guys. And there's still time where he's guilty of it. Then it looks bad. Like the Pacers game, he was, whether it was dead legs or whatever it was, that was I think the whole team was guilty of just trying to settle in that game and, run and gun, and obviously did not work. But by and large, that Hawks game was a huge moment for them. It's like, okay, this is it. Like they're going to swing 2 or 3 guys to you and you have to find the right pass. And he's getting better at not just like finding it quickly. And so that way you have the Grant Williams of the world or whoever else just getting that wide open look and kind of hitting it confidently when they need to.
Yeah. And obviously Grant has gotten so much better, especially from the perimeter. Just it's amazing to watch. I mean, you knew you had his defense, you knew he had his hustle and his girth, but now he can confidently hit those threes and consistently. It's awesome. And that I was really upset in the first half of that Hawks game. Like I was like, I'm going to turn my TV off. Like you're down like 15 to the Atlanta Hawks. Like this should be a competitive game. Atlanta Hawks are not chumps. Like Trae Young's a very good player. They have like an array of wings, like DeAndre Hunter and Bogdanovich, like good wings, solid wings.
I love Bogdanovich, by the way.
Totally.
Like, I don't know whether like he's the trade rumors when they were potentially looking at him, like he would just be a great fit. I mean, it's not going to happen now, obviously, because they're kind of settled in. But he's just he finds his game so well within the flow of it, and like you don't know what to do with him because if you jump up on him too much, he's going to drive by you. He can't defend a lick, but whatever. Like offensively, it's fun to watch.
Totally, and like that's the thing. Like he also made like every shot the other night.
Right. I mean, that's true. That helps.
Impressive. But yeah. But like I was talking to Ryan on Twitter the other day, and we were talking about Pirtle. I think that's how you pronounce it. Then like basically the Wordle of the NBA.
Yep.
Yeah, Jakob Pirtle. And we were talking about who our starters are. Like who's your starting guy, and you have to pick like the most average guy. It's sort of like you're playing F the dealer. You know, it's like when you're asked for a card, it's like higher or lower, you know? So you got to find that middle thing. You always say 7 because then you can figure out where you're going to be, you know, higher or lower. So you pick the most like middle of the road NBA player. And that's Bogdanovich. That he is like 29 years old, 6'6", you know, like I think he's number 12, you know, on his jersey. And so like you really get, and his game is like kind of the most middle of the road, like super consistent, great guy off the bench, right? And he could spot starter. I would start instead of Aaron Nesmith, I'd start Bogdanovich. All right, let's do that. Keep Derrick White on the bench. We'll just start Bogdan.
That was I think I don't know whether it was like the smart. There was a lot of Atlanta Boston noise around the trade deadline, but that was probably one of the things. If Smart would have been moved, I imagine Bogdanovich would have been one of the names coming back in a deal like that. But
I think their salaries sort of match up too, like a little bit. You know, they're both like mid, like they, you know, they were expensive. Now they're not.
Right, and now obviously with the way Smart's played, that's it would have been more than Bogdanovich coming back, but the Celtics can obviously feel very good about not moving Smart at this point based on how good he's looked in the.
They need him.
They need him in a very big way. Grant Williams, you brought him up. Do you, and I threw this, I talked to Forsberg around this, I think like a week or two ago. How interested are you in giving him an extension this summer? And from a standpoint, but like how, I know you're like interested, but like how far are you willing to go? Are we talking like, are you going over, Robb got, I think probably like 448 last year. And some of that wasn't guaranteed, and there are some incentives on top of that. Like, how far are you willing to go for Grant Williams, knowing that you have obviously a ton of money tied up with other guys on this roster right now, pretty much for the next 3 years with the White deal and the Tice deal, which we can get to in a little bit in terms of kind of having a little too much money in the books for a guy who's not playing yet. But like, how far would you go for Grant right now in terms of, with him pretty much keeping up this level of play for pretty close to 3/4 of the season now?
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. Like I'm predicating my answer on the fact that this is who he is. Like this is a logical progression, right?
Right.
First started out his career, can't shoot at all. Like for whatever reason, can't shoot, but was still sort of that shades of that really good defensive player, really good high effort player, smart basketball player, good passer. Now he can shoot. Like now he's shown he can shoot. So like that is an invaluable skill. I mean, PJ Tucker built a whole career on 3-and-D, and I know lots of people do, but I bring up Tucker because he's like got that like bulk, like dirt dog type guy as well. So I mean, these contracts always sort of fool me because whenever someone signs a new contract, I immediately am like, oh my God, that's an overpay, because every year the cap is raised at least a couple $1 million. So like I bring this up every time I talk to anyone. When Avery Bradley first signed his extension, I think it was like for like 4 years, average annual value of like $8 million. I was like, are you insane? Like for Avery Bradley, like sometimes backup point guard, but like starting point guard on like a mediocre team. Yeah, he's a good defender, but like that by the end of that contract, that was such a bargain. And so, like the end of the Rob contract, the Rob Williams contract, assuming he stays healthy. Let's say he stays healthy. That's going to be like one of the best contracts in the league. That's going to be like the most valuable contract in the league. So, like, it's hard for me to say like 4 years, $40 million is too much for Grant because I don't see how he can't get as much as Rob, even with Rob's injury history.
Right.
But he can't make. Is he going to sign like 4 years, $8 million average annual value? Like, no way. It's not going to get it done. So, like, I guess it's 440. Do you, I mean, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the more he again, he's shooting 43% from three.
It's insane
on like 3.5 attempts per game, which I don't have the. That's still probably
like Ray Allen territory.
Yeah, I mean, it's within probably like top 10, 15 in the NBA right now amongst high volume shooters. And the thing that like he actually shot pretty well last year too, but the defensive steps he's taken this year, like he was just such a mess defensively last year. He fouled I think more than almost like anyone in the league per 36 minutes, and this year that's really gotten under control. And so like there are some games where he gets pulled and you can see that Ime's not happy when I think the first half last night was an example. He had some pretty dumb fouls, I feel like. For guys taking jump shots or whatever. But by and large, in a switching scheme, he's very valuable because of, he's a smart defender and his body type lets him be able to go between 3 or 4 positions and at least kind of hold his own. So if you're like, okay, yeah, like I'm only going to give you $8 million per year, then Grant's going to be like, yeah, well, guess what? There's not a lot of guys in the league. I'm not that good, but there's not a lot of guys in the league that have my skill set that, as for a bench player right now. So like,
and
I'm going to get paid.
There's plenty of other teams that would pay that. You know what I mean? That would pay over. So you can't lowball them. You can't give them, if you want to keep them, right? Let's assume the Celtics want to keep them and they'll figure out Tice. They'll figure out the cap. They'll figure out the luxury tax. At some point, that's the other thing. At some point, if they're going all in, if they feel like their core of Tatum and Brown are it, like they're going to be good enough to contend with, added pieces around them or pieces around them that the Celtics currently have getting better, then they're going to be a luxury tax team. Like they're absolutely, it's just like it's not a question. So at that point, it's like, if you're already a luxury tax team, I mean, it's not my money, so it's easy for me to say. It's like, well, yeah, then you pay to keep Grant Williams. I mean, like, and I'm comparing him to Draymond Green just because Grant at his absolute best ever would be like the bottom of Draymond Green.
Draymond's first season.
Yeah, exactly. But he got paid like Draymond, not as much as Curry and Clay, but so like you got to pay to keep those guys around. If they didn't pay to keep Draymond around, who knows what their sort of level of success is,
Sure.
So he's in Horford insurance. Like I know Horford's gone after the season unless he signs like a really sweetheart deal or whatever. But like it's just, you need a guy like that, especially a guy to back up a guy like Horford or to start alongside Horford who has that switchability, because I worry about the mileage on Horford's legs, even going into the playoffs. But that's another topic.
All right. You brought up Horford, Jax. I think it sounds, I mean, he has this one more year on his deal next year. Half of it's guaranteed. I've talked to Ryan about it. I've talked to people around the league about it. His contract for next year. I think at this point, he's probably playing his way towards the Celtics keeping him as opposed to taking that dead cap hit of like $15 million and just not having him. Because, yeah, obviously he's not a $27 million player, but the more accurate, is he like a $12 million player? Because that's essentially what that's your take or lose it situation right now. And the way he's gone this year, it's kind of going closer to yes and no.
So wait, help me understand how his contract, how the non-guarantee works. Could they keep him for up to his guaranteed money? You just have to agree to it?
Right. So you could, if you want to keep him, you have 3 options. You can keep him for $27 million and just play like usual. You can cut him, and then you take a $14.5 million cap hit of dead cap. In that scenario, they could theoretically try to re-sign him, like cut him and then
Can they, though?
You're allowed to
Okay.
do that, but then you don't have bird rights on him, so you can only use the mid-level or
Right.
see if he'll take a sweetheart deal, which he's probably not going to do because people will be going after him if he's an open. So if I guess the bottom line is if like when you've added all this salary to your roster for next year and you're not going to have spending flexibility, like if you don't have a way to replace Al Horford on your team, given how good he has been with the Stars this year, like you kind of got to keep him, right? Like even and just take it's only one more year of the money, unless you're trading him in some kind of bigger deal for a bigger fish.
Of course, yeah. But I guess what I'm wondering is you couldn't keep him for 14. Is that what you're saying? Like you
couldn't. There's no way to keep him for 14. You can get that 14, and then you can say, hey, we're gonna cut you, but will you come back for the veterans minimum? You can try to pull something like that and get him for 16, but then he's gonna be like we know before that he likes money based on the deal he got from Philly. So I'd be
but not for nothing. Not for nothing. As much as that worked for him financially, like if you asked him, was he happy?
Right. No, it was a big mistake for him. Yeah.
Exactly.
So maybe you're right. Maybe it's like a situation like, hey Al, like we want you to stay, but we can't afford to pay you 27. So how about you do us a favor and you come back for the veterans minimum and you still get to keep half your money. Who knows? I mean, that's an easier conversation to have if the Celtics go to like the conference finals or something like that, or at least somewhere where you can say you have a big role. But you're right. There's a lot of guys. I mean, he's at a point in his career now where, he got that last big contract. So you wonder how he'll handle a potential scenario like that if it comes to that.
I think the two big questions are, it's like, for personally, Al, how badly do you want to play? Or how long do you want to play? How many more years?
Yeah.
Are you taking it year by year until the wheels fall off? Or are you like, I know I got a season and a half left? Because and if this is his last year, I'm probably, if the Celtics try to do, I give that a 5% chance of happening just off the top. The whole veteran minimum, convince him to stay. Like, I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, I can't see it happening. He's playing too well.
Right. He's playing too well. And B, like, I don't know, like when you get used to making, as someone who's used to making $27 million a year, if I had to go down to 7 or whatever the vet minimum for a guy who's been in the league forever is, that would be hard. That would be hard.
Yeah.
No, but you know what I mean? It's like, God, you have 27 in the hand and you have at least have 14 in the hand, right? If you refuse. So this goes back to what you said. It's like, well, did you take them deep into the conference finals? Are they playing well? That kind of thing. I predict, and I'm going to get killed for this, but like I predict the wheels are falling off quicker than we think. We already have seen that he isn't the player he was, but why we're not expecting him to be that player he was, 3 years ago when, he was sort of in his prime Celtics career type,
Yeah.
Now, like, we're just happy. Like his shooting has fallen off a cliff, but like he can do so many other things still really well that you're just like, okay, I'll take it. Right. But I predict in the playoffs, like it's like, that's why you need Grant Williams to be Al insurance. I think you're going to get like 1 out of every 3 games is going to be like a decent game for him. I know like there's no back-to-backs in the playoffs. I know you get longer layoffs, but like it's so much more intense basketball than what we see in like the middle of the regular season that I worry. That's the thing. I just worry. So I don't see that getting any better next year. So keeping him for $27 million next year, I really don't care either way. I like him as a guy. I like him as a player, especially the way he's playing now. I don't expect him to be as good as he is now next year. I worry, though, that it really depends. God, I'm just rambling now, but it really depends on, do you think the Celtics are this year and next year title contenders? And like, I know that there's still work to do for next year's team. This year's team's not going to be next year's team, but the core is. So like, if you think this year's core is a title contending team, then yeah, keep them. But I personally don't. Right. So like from a Callis standpoint, like I don't really care what happens. From a fan standpoint, I'm like, no, keep him. He's a guy who wants to be in Boston. He loves Boston. His sister's awesome. She loves Boston. Like, you know what I mean? Like, keep guys who want to be in Boston if it's not going to make you, appreciably better. So kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, but that's really how I feel.
No, and I mean, the next 2 months will kind of answer those questions, or at least like give a better guidance for the front office to go off those questions. Because if it looks like this is, with the right draw, they could go deep here, and maybe with a couple better free agent additions, to in the supporting cast for next year, then like they can be right back there. But if it's an ugly first round out against a tough matchup, then you look at Al's contract and be like, okay, like this is a filler trade contract to get us to that really contending level, as opposed to bringing back a 36-year-old Al Horford when you have, like you said, a cheaper alternative and Grant Williams potentially waiting in the wings. Let's wrap up with some talk around the Eastern Conference. Let's start with Brooklyn here. They are coming to town on Sunday. Durant is coming back Thursday night. I presume he'll play Sunday as well. They have 2 days off in between those games. Kyrie also making his first appearance at the Garden post Stompgate, and on top of that, Ben Simmons seems to be nowhere to be found, at least until after that Philly game for Brooklyn in another week or so, which is not surprising at all. Have you what I don't kind of see at this point, and this is probably the best situation for the Celtics. I don't see Brooklyn getting above the 7th seed. And so I feel like they're going to be stuck in that plane. And so from a Celtics standpoint, that's good from a way of like, okay, you don't have to worry, because the Celtics aren't going to get up to the 2 seed, I feel like. So you don't have to worry about them as a first round opponent in that scenario. So I think the fact that they have so much ground to make up right now, and Durant is just coming back, I just don't see them digging out of the hole and catching the Celtics or anyone else who's, in that 6th spot.
Yeah, I'm just scanning their Brooklyn schedule right now.
It's tough, I think.
Yeah, I think Miami's a tough game. They got Dallas, they got Philly, they got Charlotte, they got us, Miami again. I mean, yeah, they got some players, they got some teams they got to worry about for sure. I just feel like Brooklyn is the type of team that the Celtics aren't, where the Celtics have to rely on playing their best basketball all the time, which is why I was upset about the Detroit game. They only won by 10. Like, good teams beat that team, and they beat that team the whole game, and then to come the next day and lose to the Pacers and lose badly. And, people were saying, well, it's a back-to-back. It's like, yeah, against 2 of the worst teams in the league. It's like, come on. Good teams just don't do that. Like, I don't care. Like, good teams, if you're a really good team, you just don't do that. So Brooklyn is the type of team that's the opposite of that. They'll give away half the season. They don't care. As long as everyone is healthy at the end, as long as they got their guys, as long as the vaccine mandate is no longer in place and Kyrie can play wherever he can, then they're going to be fine. And I actually believe that. Like, I don't really care about Ben Simmons, to be honest with you. I didn't really care about the addition of James Harden. Like, I honestly think like Durant and Kyrie enough to make some noise. They're certainly on paper better than Boston. So
yeah,
I worry. I don't think they'll necessarily catch the 6th seed or whatever, but I also don't think it's going to matter much. They don't care who they play.
Yeah, I know, and I agree with that. Like, to your point, like they, by quoting out Durant this much, but not getting Simmons back in quickly, like I think they'll make a run at it, but they, making up 4.5 games against a tough schedule, in with them only having 19 games left, like that's a pretty tall order when you're integrating a lot of new parts there. But yeah, so it's like, it's just funny though that like whoever, the Bulls or the Sixers or the Bucks, like that's whoever gets that 2. I wonder if a team is going to try to get out of that 2 seed just so they don't have to deal with that as their first round matchup.
I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, if you're the Nets, you would love to play the Bulls.
Oh yeah.
Like, as much as I think the Bulls are fun and really fun this season, like, I'm taking the Nets all day over the Bulls.
Yes.
Like, I'm probably taking the Nets over the Heat, and the Heat are the same way. The Heat are fun, the Sixers and Bucks are probably the best teams in the East right now. Maybe not, obviously not on paper, but like probably the people in Brooklyn, the people you fear the most. But man, I like, as much as their record doesn't reflect it, I fear Charlotte more than like the Bulls or the Raptors or It's terrible. I just, I'm a big LaMelo Ball fan.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I love the way, I love, Miles Bridges. I love a bunch of those guys. Terry Rozier. They're just.
The first half of the season, they were scary as hell. Then Hayward got hurt, and then it's like the shit hit the fan for them. They've just been an absolute mess for at least the last. They actually blew out Cleveland tonight, but they had lost like 10 of 12 or something terrible once Hayward went out. So, but you're right. When they're all like locked in and we're playing well, they talent wise they looked as as good as the Bulls on some nights.
Yeah, totally. And I'm being unfair to the Bulls. Like they've been having a great season, and I just like when DeMar DeRozan is your best player or one of your best players. I'm just never thinking that you're gonna
right. Well, it's like the playoff when you can't erase what DeRozan looked like in Toronto over all those years in the playoffs. It's like
and in this league when you're not a 3-point shooter, like I know he's the best mid-range shooter in the league. He's like Rip Hamilton level, in the history of the league, mid-range shooter. I just like in this day and age, if you're not like if you're giving up, to go back to Tatum's shot selection, right? If you're giving up 3-point shots for long twos, even if you're making them, it's just not worth it to me, All
right. So I'll say Brooklyn is your worst case for the Celtics in the first round theoretical matchup. But they
won't get there.
They won't get that, right? Yeah. So what's your realistic best and worst first round matchups for the Celtics in terms of the possible opponents that could be, which honestly could be anyone at this point in the top 6 because everyone's so tight at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would love to play the Bulls. I think it probably goes I would go Bulls, Sixers, which is probably everyone's like, what? I'd rather play Bucks, Cavs, Heat. I think that's where I would go. And I know I'm sort of all over the place, but I like the way the Celtics match up, and I like against the Sixers. I like the way they play against the Sixers. I think they sort of, try to beat up Embiid and make everyone else beat you. And in that trade to get Harden, they gave up some shooters. They gave up Seth Curry, who just always torched the Celtics when they, packed it in on Embiid. And I'm just not a Harden. I'm the opposite of Pina. Pina loves Harden. Is the biggest, Harden stan. And I get it. He's very good. He's one of the best top 75 players, right? I can't bring myself to think that a guy with Harden's game is actually going to win a championship, that's going to translate and take them all the way. And it hasn't yet.
Right. The postseason backs you up for both those guys. It's him and Embiid have a lot to prove, and the pressure is going to be squarely on both.
Exactly. And I think Milwaukee's a little worse this year. They're awesome. They won last year, outright, and Giannis is amazing. But I just think they're a little bit worse. And so I think they're a little bit more vulnerable. And I think the Bulls are who they are. I mean, I think they're that fun flash team, kind of like what the Celtics were a few years ago with Isaiah Thomas, amazing, really fun, successful team to root for, but ultimately not going to have enough. And the Cavs scare me because they're young and they're good and they got the legs. And then Miami scares me because they're so well coached, and they have really good players, but cool. I used to be such a Eric Spoelstra hater, who is this guy? He just has really good players, but now he's a very, very good coach. So I just ran through the whole Eastern Conference.
No,
not worried about the Raps.
Not worried about the Raps. Raps are an afterthought, which this should be. That's a fun team, but they're on compared to talent wise the rest of the East, or the top 6 in the East right now. Or even top 7 with Brooklyn in there. It's a different ball game. But all right. Brendan Jackson, make sure you are following him on Twitter at JackSOBD, aka you can hit him up there at bc.edu too. His BC.edu.
So stupid.
The best. But Jax, we'll be getting back with you again as this regular season rolls on, and it is nuts here. It's playoffs are going to be starting in 6 weeks. So the Celtics have the fewest games of any team left in the NBA right now. It's they only have
lucky you,
right?
Take
I know.
I'm breather, man.
Seriously, forget we got like a couple of 2-game weeks and crap like that. It's long overdue at this point after this grand of a year. But thanks for hopping on, bud.
Absolutely.
Make sure you're following him. Make sure you're following the Winning Plays Pod. Subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us, YouTube, wherever you catch us these days. And we'll be back with you guys next week.